wanna stay ahead of the curve and follow my words. How we doing? Teach, train, innovate, solve, yeah. Teach, train, innovate, solve. If you wanna be ahead of the curve, then follow my words.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. I hope that you had a restful week off from break and that your Thanksgiving was wonderful. But tonight we're going to be talking about behavior intervention plans, and not just what they are, but how they work from the legal foundation all the way through to classroom implementation. This topic really matters because if you're preparing for the SPED 186 TExES exam, BIPs show up in multiple competencies. They connect to IDEA and they relate to FBA procedures. They tie into students' rights. This high leverage content is essential for both your test and your in-class practices. If you are an alternative certification educator juggling a classroom, a family, and this exam, I am delighted to continue to support you in this area. And I want to say this, that understanding BIPs will help you to walk into your exam with confidence and walk into your classroom with clarity. And as I've said all last week, and even during our webinar, that we had right the day before Thanksgiving, you deserve both. So tonight's session will help you to get there. I'm hoping that as we go through and along, the information that might have seemed cloudy or muddy to you before is very, very clear as we get to the end. And this is what we're going to cover. We're going to cover the legal foundations of BIPs, understanding FBAs, the foundation of every BIP, what goes into a BIP, structure and the practices, and then BIPs in the classroom, a real classroom, what it looks like, could look like from day to day. And then I'm going to close it all up and talking about the collaboration and legal safeguards that are put there in order to support you. Because truly that's what it is, a way to support yourself and a way to support your students that might be having a difficult time in the classroom. And as always, since I'm starting from the law to the classroom, let's start with the law. And the law really is for a behavioral intervention plan. It's really not optional when it's tied to IDEA. I'm going to quote the section there that you can go find it in section 300.324. When a student with a disability exhibits behavior that impedes their learning or the learning of others, that's when the IEP team is legally required to consider positive behavior interventions and supports. And if those supports do not work, and that's a time frame that you and the team get together to talk about, if the behavior leads to repeated removals, a functional behavior assessment is conducted. That FBA becomes the data source for the BIP. And so we definitely need to understand how this all goes. Now, BIPs are not directly stated within there, but it's the behavior that's stated in there in IDEA section 300.324. And that is that it's stopping learning from happening, learning for them, learning for others happening. And that stopping it, the behavior is causing the problem. So with a functional behavior assessment, and I'm going to mention FBA using the terminology FBA quite a bit, so I wanted to make sure that it was highlighted there. With a functional behavior assessment is conducted, this data, as I stated before, is a source for your BIP. For TExES SPED 186 exam, there's a few points that the exam expects you to recognize. First of all, that a BIP must be individualized, non-negotiable. It's not for everybody. A BIP must be based on the data from an FBA, which we will talk about more intrinsically as we go along. And the plan must include positive behavioral supports, not just consequences, but the supports in order for them to exhibit positive behavior repeatedly. The plan also must be evaluated and revised when data shows that it's just not effective. The test wants you to understand that a BIP is a legally protected document. This means your response choices will often focus on data, collaboration, students' rights, and ongoing monitoring. So you don't have to build this BIP alone. Well, you can't build a strong BIP without a strong FBA, and you shouldn't be trying to do it alone. And we'll talk about the safeguards for all of those as well. So when it's being built, there are some essential questions that need to be answered. Okay, so this behavior intervention plan, I'm looking for the behavior that is functioning, that is causing issues. And the 4 questions that I'm going to cover, or going to just kind of read to you tonight, are mainly going to make the behaviors fit into one of the 4 function behaviors. The student is either trying to escape, gain attention, access to items or activities, or some sensory needs. So the first question is, what is the behavior? Define it in observable and measurable terms, meaning, what do I see? And how often am I seeing it? When and where does it occur? Is it only in the classroom? Is it only at the restroom? Is it only in specials? What triggers it? Can is there a particular time that triggers it? Of course, I can't share personal information and data, but I recall a student that the trigger, once we were able to assess properly, the trigger really was getting ready to go to a particular specials that they did not care to be there. And then the 4th and final question, what does the student gain or avoid because of it? Once these questions are put to the test, I will say, and they are continuously monitored, tracked, it's going to find out what the function itself is. So once a function is identified, you can match the intervention to that function. The alignment is the core of a successful BIP. So the SPED 186 is going to test your ability to choose the intervention that matches the function. For example, if the behavior is escape-driven, the solution probably doesn't need to be punitive. And not probably. Let me state that more clearly. The solution is not more punitive consequences. It's instructional support. You scaffold in the functional behavior replacement behaviors. So the function-based replacement behaviors is what you're looking for in order to see if your plan is viable, if your plan is working properly, if your plan is on the right path. And so that guides us into what goes inside of the BIP. We've got the structure and the practice. A behavior intervention plan has predictable components. And a few of them are things like target behavior, which describes clearly, no judgment words, only what can be observed. Then a behavior function. This is based on the data, not assumptions, but the information that you've collected over time. Replacement behavior, what you are teaching the students to do instead of the target behavior. This is where many teachers kind of struggle, but it's the heart of the plan. I want to replace that behavior. What am I teaching you to do instead What is my target behavior that I want you to do? Is it that I want you to line up with the rest of the students without pushing everyone out of the way? What is that replacement behavior? I want you to line up with your hands behind your back with no issues. Preventative strategies. So that could be environmental changes that reduce some of the triggers. Some examples I would say would be visual schedules, structure routines, choice opportunities of some sort. Those could help to be preventative strategies to deter the behavior altogether. Of course, we want to use instructional strategies. We have plenty of them, and we have opportunities to swap things out. So explicitly teaching that replacement behavior, often with modeling, role play, and reinforcement. Let's go back to the student that I said was bulldozing kids to get into the line. Having students model it, I model it, showing them what's needed, and making certain that you're highlighting that great behavior. A reinforcement plan. So SPED 186 will definitely test this. You must match the reinforcement to the student's needs and the function of the behavior. All of these, and I'm going to highlight the last two that I have on here, 7 and 8, but all of these are very important pieces of what goes inside of a BIP. When we're talking about response strategies, these outline how staff should respond consistently when the behavior occurs. If you have a student that exits the classroom whenever they feel like it, and they're getting accolades and high fives and stuff from other staff members in the hallway instead of whatever plan that you all came up with, that's going to continue to reinforce the wrong behaviors. So response strategies. And then, of course, the progress monitoring. That's when I talked about, or I don't know if I mentioned that before just yet, but I'll be talking about revising and editing. So BIPs are living documents. They're not this thing that's etched in stone. They're data-driven revisions that have to occur. And educators often see BIP as just paperwork. But when this is put into practice, it becomes guardrails that support students, that supports teachers, and complies with the federal law. I know what it feels like to be given some tools to try that you don't feel like are going to work. What I say is always try and work it in the best manner that you can. And then the consistency of you doing what you're supposed to do will show whether or not that particular solution is even viable. So it becomes a something that you don't even have to worry about, but you have to implement it with fidelity. You are the expert in the classroom. Use it with fidelity, show the data. The data always tells you what is working and what does not. So BIPs in a real classroom. So we talked about the law part of it and how it's essential for the students to be able to learn and other students in the classroom as well. Now we're going to talk about what it might look like in a real classroom. And remember, I told you that the behavior that's usually exhibited may, for the most part, fit into these 4 functions. They're either trying to escape something, they want some sort of attention, they want to access an item or an activity, be it I want to get on the computer and I don't want to do this, or I want to go outside, and or sensory needs that they might have or things that are going on. So I wanted to walk you through a realistic example. And one of them is what I often have seen when I had students that were special ed in my classroom. I was a part of a team that Usually, I was the person of the classroom in which students were placed for support in that area, and I would have help with a inclusion specialist. So this student's behavior that we're going to talk about tonight is their behavior is leaving the classroom without permission. As I said before, it is something that I see quite often. When the FBA was completed and information and data was collected, the function was escape from overwhelming tasks. So essentially, there would be times and particular subjects and things that if you track it, you'll find out that that's the finding. The replacement behavior was that student request a break card. Break cards work quite well for many students. Some break cards activities are not as effective, but in this situation it was. Some preventative strategies were to provide chunked assignments. Visual expectations were placed in their area. Choices for demonstrated learning were also provided. The instructional strategy was to teach the students how to use the break card appropriately and how to re-enter and exit the activity properly. I would say the reinforcement is the positive acknowledgement when they use the break system correctly. The more you see the positive behavior being exhibited, the more you want to point it out and give the accolades, the acknowledgement that they are on track. And then the response strategy. If the student leaves the room, that staff follows a calm response protocol, avoiding any sort of escalation. Because in my time, I have seen students that will go from 0 to 100 really quick, shooting not only outside of the classroom, but clear out of the building. And sometimes when the investigations of how things went through, it had to do with some sort of escalating activity from either another student or the adult that's in charge. Before the SPED 186 exam, scenarios like these are going to be very common. The key is to choose the answer that prioritizes database supports, positive reinforcements, and consistency across the team. So as I said earlier in our in a portion of our discussion, that BIPs are not supposed to be built alone. Functional behavior assessments are also not supposed to be used alone. So there's a collaboration and some legal safeguards that go into this. And it requires collaboration with special education teachers, you as the classroom teacher, if you are the special ed teacher or the classroom teacher, a behavioral specialist that has some information and knowledge that can support you, a counselor, administrators, and of course, key members, the family. SPED 186 is going to emphasize that parent involvement is required in the development of the IEPs and any BIPs that might be needed. BIPs are not necessary when the behavior is not impeding their instruction or the instructions of others. But I also want you to understand that the staff must be trained on how to implement this BIP. A BIP should not be scripted out and you don't have an idea of what's going on or how to implement. There should be questions asked of yourself in that meeting and even to the point after the meeting if necessary. But a BIP is only effective if the adults that carry it out are consistent. You'll hear me to say that about a lot of things that I talk about on this station because often consistency is the #1 issue. Well, I tried it and it didn't work. Might not work that day, might have not worked for that week. But if you continue to practice it with fidelity and consistency, some of those things, if they're designed specifically for that student's behavior, will work. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've watched students turn around completely from effective plans being put in place. But here's the legal piece. When students experience repeated removals, schools have to check whether the behavior is a manifestation of the disability. That decision affects discipline. And we all know that there's legally, there's so many days and so much of that can happen that a student is dismissed from classes or placed in a different setting. But these decisions affect discipline. They affect placement and whether this BIP needs to be revised. SPED 186 is going to expect you to recognize this process and to choose responses aligned with IDEA. And I believe that as you continue to work through the material that you're going through, you will begin, I always trying to make things, piece these items together so that it makes sense, that in your everyday classroom, you can see how it works. But on the test, I talk a lot about just remember what they're asking you for. Don't go reaching for what's happening in your classroom. On that test, what data and information they give you, that's what you go with. But there's a few things that I want you to remember before we close tonight. Because when the BIP appears on your exam, there are going to be some patterns. The test rewards answers that center around student dignity and positive behavioral supports. It avoids answers that are going to punish behavior without addressing the function. It also is going to favor proactive strategies over reactive ones. It's going to highlight the compliance of IDEA and IEP procedures, and it expects collaboration, not isolation. So if a response choice blames the student or uses some sort of vague consequences or even skips the FBA, that you can be assured that answer is completely wrong. If you're preparing for SPED 186 exam, keep reviewing FBA reinforcement strategies. The legal safeguards under IDEA, this is the core content. And mastering it will raise your confidence immediately. Tonight's topic was a way to help you to gain a clearer understanding of behavior intervention plans from law to practice. But of course, it's only a snapshot of what we have to be able to offer you. If you want a more structured support as you study, I would love for you to join our Empower to Pass learning sessions. They're going to be beginning on December the 4th, and they're going to go for 6 weeks. Or if you want a more intimate plan, I have packages that we can discuss on a discovery call. As always, I want to thank you for tuning in and watching our episodes. I thanked my 56 subscribers this week, and I'm looking forward to more opportunities to share information that I've had the availability to acquire over my 25 plus years of being in education, and more understanding of how to work in urban Title I school districts, which was the bulk of my career. If you have more questions or concerns, of course, you can reach us at our website, ttinnovate.com, info@ttinnovate.com for emails, and then connecting with us on our various platforms would be great. But I am always here to talk to you about as you prepare for your exams. You don't need to cram. You really need a plan. And we are here to help you build it. Whether you decide to go with a simple analysis of your test exam and a roadmap to get you there that you'd like to do on your own, or whether it is walking with us as we break down the competencies so that it becomes more pliable, more understandable, more reachable for your target goal, we would love to help you here. My name is Tamara Gibson. I'm the owner and CEO of TT Innovative Solutions, and I cannot wait to see you again next Monday for another topic to help you to achieve your goal. Good night, everyone.